free college football picks. This is action here for Friday, November 25th. Tony T with our college football pick show here for Friday action. We have all 13 games. Before we get them to just a couple things, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Free college football picks are updated all season long. Free picks every day from all the major sports. We also have NBA, we have NFL, college basketball, NHL, World Cup, and more. It is a good time to subscribe, and also if you would support our channel, thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. Then visit Tony'sPicks.com. We're a multi-capper site showcasing top cappers in our industry. Click the links to the hot cappers. Get signed up to some of our long-term passes. Check out the hot cappers like Ramon, who's been hot. Mindy's been hot. I'm coming off a good day. Ben has been hot as well. Daniel, click the links to our handicapper pages. Get signed up to some of our long-term passes. See our premium picks here on the center of the page. We also have our best bets featured as well. And each capper can release one best bet per sport. So we've got many up there right now. Our $15 pick. Each capper can designate one of their picks on their card as a $15 premium pick just to showcase and introduce their service to new and existing customers. Many of them want to make a good impression with those best bets there. And of course, our 3-pack offer great value. And if you're looking for picks a la carte, check out our pick ticker. And we got plenty up there for you right now. Our promo code, you can save 20% off all premium pick packages. When you use that promo code TonyT at checkout, you can access our page by clicking the link you see in the description. Click the All Cappers tab and get signed up. Also love to hear from you guys, so post your picks in the comments below. I always like to see who you guys are on. And it can apply as a capper at our site at Tony'sPicks.com footer section. And every pick is in podcast form or on our podcast. If more convenient for you to listen to or get all the picks on the podcast, do so. Available on all major platforms. Just search Tony's Picks. All right, let's get this one started. Baylor versus Texas, college football pick for Friday. Baylor fell to 6-5 with their 29-28 home defeat to TCU Horned Frogs. Bears gained 501 yards in the game, 232 rushing on 48 carries. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per run to TCU with 327 passing on 36 attempts. Blake Shapen completed 70% of his passes with 9 yards per attempt. He passed for 269 as a touchdown and interception. This season, Shapen a 66% completion rate with 7.8 yards per attempt. Texas moves to 7-4 with their 55-14 road win at Kansas. Longhorns gained 539 yards with 427 rushing on 57 attempts. Defensively, they held the Jayhawks to 3.5 yards per attempt with 242 passing on 29 attempts. Quinn Ewers completed 57% of his passes with 5.1 yards per attempt. He passed for 107 yards and a touchdown. Bears have covered 5 of 6 following a loss. Past 5 games, Bears running for 5.3 yards per rush and the Longhorns 6.1 yards per carry. This should open up some big plays in the passing game to play here. Texas and Baylor over 55.5. Utah State versus Boise State college football pick Saturday. Utah State enters at 6-5 after their 35-31 home win to San Jose State. Aggies posted 430 yards with 186 rushing on 50 carries. Defensively, they limited the Spartans to 3 yards per rush with 257 passing yards on 39 attempts. Cooper Legis completed 66% of his passes with 7 yards per attempt. He passed for 244 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. This year, Legis a 62% completion rate with 6.9 yards per attempt. Boise State 8-3 after their 20-17 road win at Wyoming. Broncos put up 480 yards with 269 rushing on 43 carries. Defensively, they allowed nearly 9 yards per rush with 30 passing yards on 16 attempts. Taylon Green completed 59% of his passes with 6.2 yards per attempt. He passed for 211 yards and an interception. On the year, Green a 64% completion rate with 8 yards per attempt. He is rushing for 6.3 yards per attempt and 7 touchdowns. Broncos run defense an issue. Aggies average 47 yards rushing per game the past 3 games here. They've been really struggling moving the football on the ground. The play here will be on Utah State here at plus the 17. Central Michigan versus Eastern Michigan college football pick. This one here on Saturday. Eastern Michigan is the home team here. Central Michigan fell to 4-7 after their 12-10 home defeat to Western Michigan. Chippewas gained 253 yards with 159 rushing on 36 carries. Defensively, CMU allowed over 5 yards per rush to WMU with 102 passing on 19 attempts. Daniel Richardson was benched last week for Jace Bauer and Burton Emanuel, who combined for 6 of 10 passing for 94 yards and an interception. Eastern Michigan 7-4 after their 31-24 road win at Kent. Eagles produced 459 yards with 144 rushing on 44 attempts. On defense, they limited Kent to under 4 yards per rush with 241 passing on 31 attempts. Taylor Powell hit on 77% of his passes with 8.1 yards per attempt. He passed for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns. This season, Powell a 65% completion rate with 7.6 yards per attempt. Freshman Burton Emanuel looks like the future quarterback for the Chippewas. The freshman is averaging 8.3 yards per rush in his 51 carries. His run production dropped last week, so teams have film on him now. The play here will be Eastern Michigan at +2. Toledo versus the Western Michigan college football pick. This one here is on Friday. Toledo fell to 7-4 after their 42-35 home defeat to Bowling Green. Rockets gained 482 yards with 153 rushing on 45 attempts. Defensively, they allowed the Falcons to under 3 yards per rush with 395 passing on 36 attempts. Tucker Gleason completed 55% of his passes for 8.2 yards per attempt. He passed for 329 yards and 3 touchdowns, plus he had 2 interceptions in the game. On the year, Gleason a 54% completion rate with 7.9 yards per attempt. Gleason is not the run threat as first-string Daquan Finn was, who was out, by the way, with a leg injury. Western Michigan is 4-7 after their 12-10 road win at Central Michigan. WMU gained 357 yards with 255 rushing on 47 carries. Defensively, they allowed nearly 5 yards per rush here to the Chippewas with 84 passing on 11 attempts. Trayson Bourget completed 37% of his passes with 5.4 yards per attempt. He threw for 102 yards in the game. This year, Bourget a 49% completion rate with 5.5 yards per attempt. Broncos defense past 5 games holding opponents to 299 yards. Tough to lay over a touchdown with the Rockets' backup quarterback here on the road against a defense in pretty good form. The play will be Western Michigan at +7.5. Tulane versus Cincinnati college football pick here for Saturday. Tulane moved to 9-2 after their 59-24 home win to SMU. Green Wave gained 451 yards with 310 rushing on 42 carries. On defense, they held the Mustangs to over 3 yards per attempt with 329 passing yards on 52 attempts. Michael Pratt completed 64% of his passes with 10.1 yards per attempt. He threw for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns. On the year, Pratt a 65% completion rate with 8.3 yards per attempt. Cincinnati improved to 9-2 after their 23-3 road win at Temple. Bearcats posted 388 yards with 131 rushing on 43 carries. Defensively, they held the Owls to under 2 yards per rush with 167 passing on 36 attempts. Ben Bryant's questionable with that foot injury in a game-time decision. On the year, Bryant a 61% completion rate with 7.8 yards per attempt. Backup Evan Prater in relief last week completed 70% of his passes with 7.5 yards per attempt. He threw for 127 yards. Now, the sophomore on the year, a 69% completion rate with 9.2 yards per attempt. Cincinnati at home is holding teams to 3.7 yards per rush. Prater looked good in relief of Bryant, and their passing game really averaging 276 yards and 9 yards per attempt at home. The play here will be Cincinnati at -1. Arizona State versus Arizona college football pick Saturday. ASU fell to 3-8 with their 31-7 home defeat to Oregon State. Sun Devils gained 276 yards with 154 rushing on 25 carries. Defensively, they allowed over 5 yards per rush to the Beavers with 221 passing on 24 attempts. Trenton Bourquette completed 62% of his passes with 3.8 yards per attempt. He passed for 122 yards. Now, this season, Bourquette a 79% completion rate with 7.2 yards per attempt. Arizona drops to 4-7 after their 31-20 home defeat to Washington State. Wildcats produced 441 yards with 84 rushing on 22 carries. Defensively, they allowed over 4 yards per run to the Cougars with 193 passing on 36 attempts. Jane DeLauer completed 61% of his passes, 7.8 yards per pass attempt. He passed for 357 yards of touchdown, but had 4 interceptions. Head-to-head, the over is 6-0 in their past 6 at Arizona. Past 3 games, Wildcats allowing 5.3 yards per rush, and the Sun Devils 6.4 yards to carry on the ground. This should open up passing games here. The play here will be Arizona State over 65.5. Arkansas versus Missouri college football pick for Saturday. Arkansas improved to 6-5 with their 42-27 home win to Ole Miss. The Razorbacks gained 503 yards with 335 rushing on 43 carries. Defensively, they surrendered 7 yards per rusher to Ole Miss with 240 passing on 36 attempts. KJ Jefferson completed 62% of his passes with 7.7 yards per attempt. He passed for 284 yards and 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. On the year, Jefferson a 67% completion rate with 8.8 yards per attempt. Missouri enters play at 5-6 with their 45-14 home win to New Mexico State. Tigers put up 443 yards with 182 rushing on 37 carries. Defensively, they limited the Aggies to 3.5 yards per attempt on the ground, 115 passing on 21 attempts. Brady Cook completed 70% of his passes with 9.3 yards per attempt. He passed for 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. This season, Cook a 65% completion rate with 7.4 yards per attempt. Tigers are one away from bowl eligibility, and the Razorbacks are bowl eligible. On the road, the Razorbacks are allowing 502 yards, 4.5 yards per rush, 345 passing with 8.5 yards per attempt. Defensively, the Tigers have been good at home, limiting opponents at 324 yards and 3 yards per rush. The play here will be on Missouri +4. New Mexico versus Colorado State. College football picks Friday. Mexico fell to 2-9 after their 34-10 home defeat to San Diego State. Lobos gained 209 yards with 97 rushing on 26 carries. Defensively, they limited the Aztecs to 4 yards per rush with 282 passing yards on 26 attempts. C.J. Montez completed 15 of 23 for 112 yards and an interception. Montez is the third quarterback used this season for the struggling Lobos. He's seen a mop-up duty in 2 prior games, throwing a total of 1 pass. Colorado State fell to 2-9 after their 24-12 road defeat at the Air Force. Rams posted 244 yards with 65 rushing on 22 carries. Defensively, they surrendered 359 yards to the Falcons on 71 attempts. Falcons attempted only 2 passes. Clay Millen completed 79% of his passes with 7.5 yards per attempt. He threw for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. New Mexico has failed to cover 6 straight at Colorado State. Lobos' quarterback situation the concern and prefer Millen. On the road, New Mexico averaging only 213 yards. The play here will be Colorado State at -7.5. NC State versus North Carolina. College football pick for Saturday. NC State improved to 7-4 with their 25-10 road defeat at Louisville. Wolfpack gained 291 yards with 77 rushing on 31 carries. Defensively, they allowed the Cardinals to nearly 5 yards per rush with 153 passing yards on 25 attempts. Ben Finley completed 46% of his passes with 5.7 yards per attempt in his first action of the season. Now, NC State utilized their 4th stringer with injuries and ineffectiveness. North Carolina fell to 9-2 after their 21-17 home defeat to Georgia Tech. Tar Heels gained 365 yards with 163 rushing on 33 carries. Defensively, they allowed over 4.5 yards per rush to the Yellow Jackets with 187 passing on 15 attempts. Drake May hit on 53% of his passes with 6.7 yards per attempt. He threw for 202 yards and an interception. On the year, May a 69% completion rate with 34 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 9.2 yards per attempt. Past 3 games, NC State holding teams to 2.5 yards per rush and a 58% completion rate. Tar Heels defense a concern. North Carolina has Clemson next week in the ACC title game. The play here will be NC State +6.5. Nebraska versus Iowa college football pick. This one here is on Friday. Nebraska fell to 3-8 with their 15-14 home defeat to Wisconsin. Cornhuskers gained 171 yards with 65 rushing on 29 carries. Defensively, they allowed 4.5 yards per rush to the Badgers with 83 passing on 18 attempts. Casey Thompson completed 47% of his passes with 11.5 yards per attempt. He threw for 172 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. On the season, Thompson a 63% completion rate with 8.7 yards per attempt. Iowa improved to 7-4 after the 13-10 road win at Minnesota. Hawkeyes produced 280 yards, 59 rushing on 28 carries. Defensively, they did allow over 6 yards per rush to the Golden Gophers with 87 passing yards on 15 attempts. Spencer Petras completed 62% of his passes, 9.2 yards per attempt. He threw for 221 yards. Now this year, Petras a 57% completion rate with 6.2 yards per attempt. The past 3 games, Cornhuskers averaging only 195 yards. In that period, Cornhuskers allowing 343 yards, 208 rushing for 4.3 yards a carry. Now, Petras, during his 4-game win streak, he's completed 63% of his passes with 7.3 yards per attempt. 3 of those wins came by 14 or greater points. Play here would be Iowa -10.5. UCLA versus California college football pick for Friday. UCLA fell to 8-3 after their 48-45 home defeat to USC. Bruins gained 513 yards with 204 rushing on 37 carries. Defensively, they allowed 4.5 yards per rush to the Trojans with 470 passing yards on 43 attempts. Dorian Thompson-Robinson completed 60% of his passes with 8.1 yards per attempt. He threw for 309 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. On the year, Thompson-Robinson about a 70% completion rate, 8.2 yards per attempt. California is 4-7 after a 27-20 home win to Stanford. Golden Bears posted 393 yards with 13 rushing on 22 carries against their rival. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush to the Cardinal with 271 passing yards on 48 attempts. Jack Plummer completed 53% of his passes with 6.5 yards per attempt, I should say. He threw for 280 yards and touchdown with 2 interceptions. This year, Plummer a 62% completion rate with 6.7 yards per attempt. Bruins have played to over in 5 straight on the road. Calo's over in 4 straight. The past 3 games, Bruins defense allowing 518 yards, 377 passing for 9.3 yards per attempt. Golden Bears in this period allowing 276 passing yards for 7.1 yards per attempt. And the Bruins offense, though, the past 3 games, they're moving the football 516 yards, 7.1 yards per rush, 7.5 yards per pass time. Now, you look at the Cal's offense here. In this span, they're passing 2/3 of the time. The play here will be UCLA and California over 61. Florida versus Florida State college football pick. This one goes off here on Saturday. Florida is 6-5 after their 31-24 road defeat at Vanderbilt. Gators produced 445 yards with 45 rushing on 21 attempts. Defensively, Florida allowed 4.5 yards per rush to the Commodores with 108 passing on 16 attempts. Anthony Richardson completed 59% of his passes with 5.9 yards per attempt. He threw for 400 yards with 3 touchdowns and an interception. On the season, Richardson a 56% completion rate with 7.8 yards per attempt. Now, Florida State improved to 8-3 after that 49-17 home win to Louisiana. Seminoles gained 440 yards in this one, 251 rushing on 45 carries. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush to the Raging Cajuns with 159 passing on 36 attempts. Jordan Travis, 64% completion rate with 8 yards per attempt. He had 112 passing yards and a touchdown. This season, Travis, a 65% completion rate with 8.9 yards per attempt. Seminoles have been propounding teams here. Back-to-back road games and a short week for Florida. Past 3 games, FSU holding teams to 213 yards. The play here will be on Florida State minus 9.5. Wyoming versus Fresno State college football pick Friday. Wyoming falls to 7-4 with their 20-17 home defeat to Boise State. Broncos gained 308 yards with 278 rushing on 32 carries. On defense, they allowed 4.5 yards per run to the Broncos with 211 passing on 34 attempts. Jane Clemens completed 19% of his throws, 1.9 yards per attempt. He passed for 30 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now the Cowboys, they lost their starter to injury. This season, Clemens a 41% completion rate with 5 yards per attempt. Fresno State 7-4 after their 41-14 road win at Nevada. Bulldogs gained 524 yards, 163 rushing on 33 carries. Defensively, they allowed nearly 5 yards per rush to the Wolfpack with 243 rushing on 38 attempts. Jake Kaner completed 69% of his passes with 8.6 yards per attempt. He passed for 361 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the year, Hainer a 74% completion rate, 8.8 yards per attempt. Bulldogs on a 6-game win streak. Cowboys quarterback situation a mess on the road to Wyoming, averaging only 327 yards a game. The player will be Fresno State minus 14.5. That was our college football pick show here for action on Friday. Make sure to like, subscribe, set notifications. We'll have an NBA and college basketball a little bit later on. And don't forget to visit our TonySmith.com for our best of the day. Click the link in the description. Get signed up over there. And don't forget our promo code TonyT at checkout will save you 20%. I'm Tony T. We'll talk to you later on.